Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Bill Hancock, present. Jim, you might want to stick around for this part. Bill Hancock, the executive director of the college football playoff, to present the national championship trophy to Michigan.
Thank you, Reese. Tonight, with this awesome crowd in this wonderful building, is a fitting conclusion to the 10th college football playoff. And I'm here tonight on behalf of the conferences and schools that administer the playoff to present the national championship trophy to Coach Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines.
Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. I was pretty sure you wouldn't mind hearing that announcement again. As a matter of fact, I don't think any of us will ever get tired of hearing that. What a year it's been, and what a week. If you're like me, you're still on cloud nine after Monday night. That's why I'm late this week in getting the show up. I just wanted to kick back and try to digest what happened on Monday night in Houston. Because to be honest with you, I've been wondering for a long time if I'd ever live to see us hoist that national championship trophy. Incredible. That is all I can say. Joining us in just a minute will be beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. We will, of course, talk about the playoffs and the national championship game, but we also took time to reflect on the journey it took to get us here. I think we'll be doing more shows like that between now and the start of next season, and I don't think you'll mind. For today, let's just enjoy the fruits of a long and grueling season that had so many ups and downs and tested not only this team and its coach, but the fan base as well. Let's hear once again from the offensive player of the game on Monday night, as Gus Johnson likes to say, Blake the Great.
Before we present this trophy, which has been the ultimate goal, we want to talk to the players of the game first. The offensive player of the game tonight from Michigan is Blake Corum. Blake, you guys were able to set the tone early. You ran for more yards in the first half than Washington had given up in a game all season. How do you think that set the tone for the rest of the night?
We knew we needed to set it early. The offensive line, shout out to y'all, man. Shout out to the tight ends and receivers. Y'all really killed it today. Michigan, we did this for you.
You were coming back off an injury, didn't get a chance to do the things you wanted to do a year ago, and you guys had a singular focus all year. Now that this moment's been realized, how does it compare to what you imagined it would be?
This is everything I imagined. When we said to come back, it was a lot of us. We said we had unfinished business. So I'll leave y'all with this. Business is finished.
The business was indeed finished. Over 100 yards tonight, found his way to the end zone repeatedly as he has throughout his career.
The defensive player of the game is a soft-spoken, low-key guy that we don't hear from very often. What a game he played. Here is Will Johnson.
The defensive player of the game tonight really turned things around early in the second half. The great defensive back, Will Johnson, both wearing number 2, by the way. Number 2 is a good night for teams that are going to be number 1. Will, tell me about the play. Washington gained a little momentum late in the first half, but you came out and made a play along the sideline with just a spectacular interception.
Man, that's all credit to Coach Minner. D-line up front, they made that play for me, and I just capitalized on it.
You guys seem to have this prolific passing attack, and particularly Michael Penix, who's a great quarterback, but you had him off rhythm and uncomfortable all night. How did you go about doing that?
First of all, I just want to give credit to those guys. Those coaches over there, they did a great job all season in this game too. But like I said, preparation, Coach Minner, Coach Herb, Coach Harbaugh, they had us in the right position this game.
Jim Harbaugh had waited 9 years for this moment, and he was gloriously happy.
And now let's talk, if I can find him, the head coach of the Wolverines, Jim Harbaugh. Hey, Jim, congratulations.
Thank you.
I heard you tell Holly Rowe that each one of these pieces of confetti had a story. What story are these confetti pieces telling right now?
It was a journey, a spiritual journey. Just took counsel from God, the Holy Spirit, this team, everybody, unanimous support for each other.
What does this mean, Jim, to be able to share this? Those look good on you, pal. Those look good on you.
Will Johnson, too. Will Johnson, too.
What does it mean to be able to share this with your dad, your brother John here, and to reach this pinnacle for university in a place you love?
Yeah, I just want to say to my two great loves, my family at work, this team, and my family at home, I love you. I love you. Congratulations.
Jim, when you think about what your mission was when you came back to Michigan, a Michigan man, which says means so much to you, what does this mean for Michigan football big picture in the modern era, the first undisputed championship?
15-0. This is a spectacular team, and I would just say there are over 100 Michigan men that are on this team in uniform tonight, and what they've done for the last 372 days is amazing. They're champions, simply known as national champions. Pull it down! Pull it down! We did that! We did that!
As I mentioned earlier, this season was a journey filled with twists and turns that a Hollywood screenwriter probably couldn't even write and make us believe. Joining me next with his thoughts on all of that and more is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. So stay with us. Joining us on our game day segment today to recap that great national championship game and take a look back at the season is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you with us, Aaron.
Hey, Mike, it's good to be back. As I was telling you off air, still recovering from Monday night, but what a night it was, what a game, and it was really the perfect ending capper to what was a wild season.
Oh, absolutely it was. And we've all had, as you said, a few days to, kind of let what happened on Monday night in Houston soak in. It might take longer for all of us because, when you think about it, Aaron, just 4 short years ago, no one, Michigan fan or foe, would have predicted this, would they?
No. I mean, I certainly didn't. A lot of folks were down on Jim Harbaugh after that 2020 season. In fact, we spoke to athletic director Ward Manuel after the game Monday night there in Houston, and he took credit for it. He even acknowledged a lot of folks wanted him to fire Jim Harbaugh. There might have been a period there where he was considering it, but he ultimately stuck with him. Jim made changes to his coaching staff. They clearly changed the culture and what they wanted to accomplish and how they wanted to look and play, and it certainly paid dividends. I mean, three straight Big Ten championships, 3 straight college football playoff appearances, and then to cap it off with a national championship. I mean, I don't know. It's been an incredible 3-year run. I don't know how many people necessarily would have predicted this, but kudos to Jim and the way that the program's rebounded.
Well, it's hard to know where to begin when breaking down this season that we've just witnessed, but let's go back to the beginning. No Jim on the sidelines the first 3 weeks. That was probably, to me anyway, our first indication that nothing was going to derail this team, wasn't it, Aaron?
No, I mean, you wondered how they were going to react. Yes, it was non-conference play, and it was Bowling Green and East Carolina and UNLV, but they handled themselves well. I mean, JJ had that poor performance against Bowling Green, but when you go back and look at the box score and the way the game that played out, it didn't really matter much. You got the feeling Michigan was the dominant, better team against those opponents, and you wonder how they were going to handle Big Ten play, but they handled themselves well. The coaching staff kind of showed up and handled the moment. And that's kind of when we got our first glimpse of like Sharon Moore and some of these assistants and what they really could do when given the ball. It was a interesting first 3 games, and obviously we didn't expect maybe the way the rest of the season was going to play out, but it was a good precursor to the fact that yes, this team was very good. They could score points, and defensively they were dominant too.
Well, through the first 8 games, even though Michigan was ranked in the top 4, it just seemed like every beat writer or broadcaster for the opposition that I would talk to each week would say, yeah, they're good, but... So through 8 weeks, it just seems to me there were still a lot of doubters, weren't there?
Probably some of that goes back to the last 2 semifinal appearances and them just not handling it on the big stage. There were probably some detractors when it came to the Big Ten as a conference. I mean, if you go look at it, up and down the league this year, it wasn't potentially strong. Some really good defenses. When you consider the Penn States and the Iowas and even, obviously Michigan, but offensively, there was a lot of some struggles there. Some teams that struggled to score points, below average play. Maybe when you look at the Ohio State and even the Penn State, offensively, there was some doubt. I mean, rightfully so, given everything that happened. But when you look back at it now, I think it was again just a reminder and just that this Michigan team was dominant. That they handled their business. Every team that was put in front of them, whether it was the Iowas or the Ohio States or the Penn State, that they handled them. They handled business. They set out what they came to accomplish, and it was really. I think at that point it became obvious to most of us watching that this team was another national title contender. It just came down to whether they could show up on the big stage and do it.
Yeah, and when you go 15-0, run the gauntlet in the Big Ten, win a national championship, there always has to be a moment, I think, for the fan base, maybe even the media, where you say, I have no more questions about whether this team is good, whether they're special. For me, it was the Penn State game. I mean, the outside noise was at a peak, as you remember. That performance kind of sealed it for me because I saw that as a defining moment for this team. Mentally tough. That was a special performance, wasn't it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I can remember it at that point, the sign stealing stuff had become, in golf, college football, it was all over the news. Players said that, they weren't distracted by it all. And you started to question that. And then the Penn State stuff happened, and that, they fly to State College and they find out about Jim Harbaugh's suspension from the Big Ten upon landing there. And you wonder if all of that weight was going to come down on them, whether that was going to be the moment that would break them. And as you said, they came out and that game against the Nittany Lions and handled business. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't perfect, but they played their style of football. They handled the moment and they dominated. And that's probably, you're right, that's probably the moment where many of us realized it was a possibility. I'll go even one step further. The final play of that, the Ohio State game, the final drive where Rod Moore comes up with that game-sealing interception and kind of seals things. Ohio State had a chance to go down and win that game. And yet Michigan's defense, as it showed time and time again this year, it came up and made the big play. And it was a reminder that this team was the best team in the Big Ten. There was no question about it. And it was just a matter of whether they could finally get over the hump in the playoff.
Well, as gratifying as that Ohio State win was, and we'll remember that forever, an epic performance. That next week in Indy, I think, was a big exhale for the team and the Michigan fan base. Because if there was a game this year when I thought, hey, these guys are tired mentally and physically, that was it. Did you get that feeling that Saturday night in Indy, Aaron?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe that they were overlooking that game. remember, that was their third straight trip to Indy, playing in the Big Ten championship. They rested some guys like Will Johnson didn't play in that game, and you knew Iowa offensively wasn't going to do much or muster a whole lot, and they didn't. So you wondered if that's the game where maybe mistakes would compile, and maybe the game would end up being a little closer than you'd expect. And really, it wasn't. I mean, they shut out the Hawkeyes. Iowa could barely move the football. Michigan's offense wasn't particularly great, but it really didn't have to be. When you saw how they played defensively, they would get some turnovers and kind of put their offense in position to score relatively easily. So in a way, it was almost the ideal opponent for a Big Ten championship game, because you're right, it could have been a letdown spot. It could have been an opportunity where they play a closer game and they end up getting scared, and it ends up being a close game, and they potentially hamper their college football playoff chances. So luckily it wasn't. They showed up for the moment, and it was again another kind of chapter in this season of excellence, of dominance.
Well, the next day when the bowl seedings, the playoff seedings were announced, we of course found out Alabama was the opponent in the first game at the Rose Bowl. And a lot of media folks, the national guys and gals, thought even though favored, it was a bad matchup for Michigan. And there was, as you remember, a lot of talk about watching the Michigan players when that announcement was made, that there was silence. And in the end, I think looking back now, you can say they were wrong, weren't they?
Yeah, and I said it in the days afterwards. I thought the reaction was a little overblown by those folks. I was in the room with the team that day when they found out the matchup, and I'd say the reaction to finding out they were playing Alabama matched the reaction to them finding out they were the number one seed. It was kind of just whatever. I think the team was more or less hungover from the night before, having played the Big Ten championship game so late and tired and everything else, than it was maybe, reluctant to playing Alabama. We spoke to the players immediately afterwards, and the guys like Blake Corum were excited because they were going against former high school teammates. It was another challenge to them to prove to the college football world that, hey, we are real. The sign stealing stuff and the distractions were whatever. And this was a chance for them to come out and beat a big program on a big stage. And that's exactly what happened. Yes, you're right. The lead up to the game all week was that, how would Michigan handle Alabama's size and physicality and SEC speed and everything else? And they handled business again. I mean, it was no doubt by the end of it, they were the better team. They overwhelmed the Crimson Tide by the end of it. You got a feeling that Jalen Milroe wasn't as effective as some folks thought he would be with his arm, certainly. And Michigan at that point, I think it was after that game against Alabama, after the win, and I said it before the game, if they beat the Crimson Tide, they were going to win the national championship. They were destined to do it, and sure enough, that's what happened.
Well, I think a lot of those same critics thought, hey, Michigan got lucky against Bama. Michael Penix and his NFL receivers are going to carve these guys up in the Natty. And Michigan's offense, hey, they're going to have to throw, so it's going to be a track meet kind of a game. They were wrong again, weren't they, Aaron?
It all came down to the defense. And I said this, if Michigan won the game, it would be a lower scoring affair. And if Washington ended up winning, it would be the track meet. And it ended up being, it favored Michigan, right? When you get in these situations where you have elite defenses going up against elite offenses, more times than not, the defense tends to win out. And that's what we saw Monday night. Michigan got enough pressure on Michael Penix to disrupt his throws, have him thinking, and it resulted right in the stat sheet. Penix was 27 of 51 for 255, two interceptions that really, I think, helped swing the game. And it was another reminder that Michigan's defense was legit, have a collection of talent and depth that I think really made this thing go all season long. And, kudos to Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator. I think he deserves, I think he's Michigan's top assistant all season long. And there was obviously a lot of talk about Sherrod Moore, and he had a great year and everything else. But, I mean, to rally this collection of guys, there aren't really any first-round picks in this group. It's just a bunch of guys playing within a system, knowing their role, and executing the assignment, doing their job. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, the sacks are spread out, the turnovers are spread out. You got guys who, have no problem playing half the snaps so that teammates can go in there. And it really benefited the unit. I can remember, you talked about, 2020 and before, and how Michigan's defenses were statistically good at that point, but they tend to get worn down against the Ohio State and some of those elite offenses. Since then, they've changed the defensive scheme, the approach, and everything else to slow modern offenses down, like the Ohio State and like Washington. And you saw it Monday night against the Huskies.
Well, this team that reached the mountaintop has so many key players. It's hard to really single them all out, but let's just touch on a few, starting with J.J. McCarthy. I mean, he might not have the stats of some of the other big-name quarterbacks out there, and he doesn't, but he is certainly the straw that stirs the drink, without a doubt, isn't he, Aaron?
Oh, no doubt. And I think the only reason he doesn't have those stats are just because of the lack of volume, right? Michigan's offense is still predicated on running the football. That was the case again this year. They ran at nearly a 60% clip. So, and as we talked about earlier, there were games early in the year where JJ didn't play much in the fourth quarter, if at all. So he just didn't get the opportunities that I think put up, like 4,000 yards passing, because he probably could have done it. But you're right. I think in crunch time, when it mattered most, he was the key guy. I mean, go back to that final drive of regulation against Alabama in the Rose Bowl. Some of the throws he made, the plays he was able to operate. He was a big reason why they were able to tie that game. And he's going to go down in Michigan as a Michigan legend. Jim Harbaugh has praised him nonstop all season. He's called him the best quarterback in Michigan history. Some of the statistics bear that out, just in terms of his completion percentage and accuracy and everything else. But he was a big factor because of that. His arm, and not only that, but his legs. I mean, it really opened things up in some of these key games down the late in games where Michigan needed a first down or needed some big yardage, and he had no problem going to get it. Quarterbacks in the past here at Michigan, they weren't necessarily known for the legs. They couldn't always do that. And just always seen this year when Michigan needed a play, whether it was through the air or with his legs, McCarthy came through.
Well, the other guy that encapsulates what it means to be a leader is Blake Corum. Coming off surgery last year, no one would have blamed him if he said, hey, I'm going to the NFL. It's hard to put into words what a guy like Blake Corum meant to this team, isn't it, Aaron?
It is, and especially nowadays in college football, where you're right, guys they have big years, statistically they do well, they more than likely leave the NFL just because they want the contract, they want the money, especially at the running back position where, time is precious. I've never been around a student athlete that's as well-rounded as him. His commitment to playing football, his commitment to getting better, the off-the-field stuff, the donations and the charity work and everything he's done. I mean, people throw around the Michigan man term a lot. And while Blake isn't from the state of Michigan, I can fully say, and Jim Harbaugh has said this, he's a true Michigan guy. I mean, just his commitment to the program, his commitment to the team. And I thought they used him smartly this year. Last year and even last 2 years really, he was broken down by the end of both years. I mean, they ran him so much, they put a lot on his plate where he wasn't 100% by the end of the year, and I think it really affected the result of the season. This year it was kind of the opposite, right? They slowly worked him into the offense. They used him in goal line situations where he could still have an effect and rack up touchdowns and everything else. And then by the end of the year, Ohio State, Alabama, the national championship, they let him go. It was vintage Blake Corum. He had the big runs, the big moments, the big scores, and credit to him. He's had a remarkable career at Michigan. He deserves all the credit he has. He was integral down the stretch.
And the offensive line took some heat this year. People were saying pretty much all season, not as good as the Joe Moore lines of the two previous years, which really wasn't fair. But, they were good all year, and they were big time from Penn State on. And especially when you got to Ohio State and you lost Zach Zinter, that stretch shut a lot of people up who doubted that offensive line, didn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, don't forget too the depth. Like, people rolled their eyes at the beginning of this year when I think when Sherrone Moore was talking about how they had he felt like they had kind of 10 starters. They needed a lot of those guys this year between the injuries early on. You mentioned Zach Zinter's injury late, the shifting and moving they had to do with some guys. Carson Barnhart moving from tackle to guard. Just kind of the versatility and depth of that unit really kind of withstood some of the uncertainties. And you're right, going into Alabama, I think there's some questions about how the offensive line would hold up. They didn't play particularly well in the Big Ten title game. They held up against Ohio State fine, but, how they were going to hold up against the, big, bad Alabama defensive line was the big question. It was a big storyline going into that Rose Bowl game, and kudos and credit to them. I think the way the offense was schemed up, I think the way that Sherrone Moore built a lot of that motion and disguised their line of scrimmage, I think really kept Alabama off balance, and it helped create some of the holes in separation. And I think it was never more obvious than against Washington, where I think that the size and physicality difference made was a big factor. Because, I mean, gosh, you go back and look at some of those runs from Donovan Edwards and Blake late in the game, the holes are wide open, and anyone could have ran through those things. And it's testament to the offensive line. They did a very good job. It was well built this year. And while maybe it wasn't as dominant as the last couple of years, ultimately they're going to be known as national champions. And I think at the end of the day, that's probably really the only thing that matters.
Well, and then you've got the defense. I mean, there's so much to talk about there. Not really a star, I suppose, on that side of the ball. And, as a Michigan fan, I've seen a lot of great defenses in my time, going back to the Schembechler years, the Lloyd Carr years, the 97 defense. Never one have I seen that has been this dominant and this deep. This was truly, and I hope we will appreciate this, a defense for the ages, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, 100%. It was by and far Jim's best defense that he's gotten here. And it was, as I said earlier, it was well built. You had bigger physical guys up front at defensive tackle, something Michigan didn't really have, 3 or 4 years ago. Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Rayshawn Benny and Chris Jenkins. The depth was there. Then you go to the outside and the edge, and you had really 4 legitimate edge rushers, guys who had experience, had the ability to get to the football, and Michigan no problem rotating those guys in. And then you really had, again, 3 middle linebackers for 2 spots. So the depth was there. You had Junior Colson back. You had Michael Barrett for his 6th year. You had a key transfer, Ernest Hausman, come in, who Michigan generally thought could have been their starter. And then you had a secondary where I think was underrated at times this year. Not a lot of, maybe headliner names there. Will Johnson obviously being the outlier, but, we forget he didn't play much the first 3 or 4 games of the season. They kind of weaned him in as the season went on. But I think the superstar of the defense, the shining star, if you're going to point to anybody, would be Mikey Samer still. I mean, just an incredible story. Starting at receiver a couple of years ago, they moved him to defensive back, and I mean, they knew he could do it, I think, but I don't necessarily know if you ask the coaches the question behind the scenes if they thought he'd become this caliber of player so quickly. I mean, he was such a sure tackler, didn't make a ton of mistakes, came up with a big play when you needed him to. I'm really curious to see where he goes in the NFL draft. I think his stock is really high. There's a lot of folks that really like him. But man, I mean, he had such a good year. It's credit to him, and I think you talk about the stir that or the straw that stirred the drink on offense. He was certainly that on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and that defensive line, I mean, if you have to single some folks out too, I mean, week after week watching Chris Jenkins, you didn't hear a lot about him, but if you paid attention to what Chris Jenkins was doing, he was getting doubled a lot. He was freeing up everyone else. And then Mason Graham, what an incredible front. And again, the depth there was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Jenkins was another guy who could have left the NFL last year. He had a legitimate, late day 2, early day 3 grade on him. Most guys in his position probably would have left, but he decided to come back for one more year. He put on some weight, really became that bell cow nose tackle that Michigan needed, with a little bit of athleticism to go with it. Credit to him. And then Mason Graham's going to be a star. I think he's already a star, but I mean, we spoke to Jesse Minter after the game Monday night in the locker room, and he couldn't say enough good things about Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And I think Michigan really lucked into finding those two kind of under the radar guys. They're going to be stars. They're going to be future All-Americans, and Michigan's in a good place up the middle in the next couple of years.
Well, like we said at the top of the show, Aaron, it's going to take a while to fully process just how special this season was, and we're going to have plenty of time to do that. Now our attention is, shifting to Jim Harbaugh. It shouldn't be long before we find out whether he stays or heads to the NFL. But do you have a feel one way or the other how that might go?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one I think everyone wants to answer to, right? I think for him, it's going to come down to whether he gets an offer from the NFL franchise he feels like is a good fit. And I know it's a loaded answer, and it's tough to decipher. But I do generally think Jim wants to go back to the NFL. He said it a couple of years ago after he interviewed with the Vikings that a Super Bowl remains high on his radar. It's a goal of his. It's something that as a football guy you want to chase and you want to get. And I have to think after the last 3 years here at Michigan, and him winning a national championship, that's kind of that goal is front and center. So I do think if an NFL team comes in with a lucrative offer, something where he feels like he can come in, make a difference, and win relatively quickly, he's probably going to go. At the same token too, I don't necessarily think that's a slam dunk. He has hired an NFL agent, which is notable because he hasn't done that before. So that tells me that his interest in going back to the NFL is serious. I do think this year changed him in some ways. I think for the first time we really saw him click with his players. You saw him, beloved. You saw folks around the program clamor to him, and it's really been a remarkable shift from what we saw a few years ago. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he does decide to stay. In Michigan, there's a contract extension on his desk, essentially, waiting for him to sign. That would essentially make him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. So money wouldn't be an issue, but it comes down to what Jim wants. And I think the NFL is there. And then if a team comes to him, he'll probably take it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of fans are thinking, well, if Jim goes, JJ's going. Not that they're a package deal, but JJ I think has until next week, the 15th, to declare. And he met with one of the NILs, I think yesterday, which would have been Thursday. But that's going to be a big decision.
It will be. For him, there's a lot to factor in, right? Like, which of your teammates stay and go? Does Jim Harbaugh decide to stay around? What does his draft stock look like? We're hearing generally first round. There's mixed opinions on him. Some folks think he could go as high as maybe the top 10. Some folks think he's maybe a borderline first round pick. So it's kind of all about. It comes down to really what he wants, right? You mentioned NIL. He's been compensated really handsomely the last couple of years. So I think that would be enough to convince him to stay. But it's come down to, has he accomplished everything he's wanted to at Michigan?
Mm-hmm.
He's been the starter now the last 2 years. He's won a couple of three Big Ten championships. He's won a national championship. And just like Jim, if the desire is there to finally go to the NFL, he's probably going to make that call. I would say most quarterbacks in his situation probably would leave. But I will say, just like Jim, there is an attachment to Michigan. I mean, he loves it here. He loves his teammates. He loves the program. He loves Ann Arbor. So that will certainly, factor in. I suspect, a decision will be made here before Monday, probably in the next couple of days. It was funny. The team got back from Ann Arbor Tuesday night, and they had a rival event there at Schembecker Hall, and a lot of fans showed up, and there was video out there on social media, but a lot of fans were chanting one more year at JJ, and he kind of laughed, and you could tell he took in the moment. So it was going to be a big decision. I think him coming back would automatically make Michigan again another contender to win a Big Ten and national championship. And if he leaves, it would certainly change things, and it would shift a change in the program. Nonetheless, it's going to be an interesting decision to watch. I don't really know which way he's leaning. But it's going to be interesting to find out.
Well, what JJ does, what Jim does, is going to be huge in the coming days. And what happens next, I guess, is going to be a discussion in the coming weeks. But two names that we do need to mention are Sharon Moore and Jesse Minter. The rest of college football learned what I think most of us already knew. These are two very elite coaches and coordinators, aren't they, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, they're shining stars in the industry. And given what we've seen in the past from them, it makes sense. I mean, Sharon joined the staff in 2018, and it's kind of been a rocket up the stature ever since. I mean, went from tight ends coach to offensive line to, Jim trusting him with the play calling. And he's really gravitated toward Jim. Jim obviously likes him and thinks he one day will be a head coach, and it just comes down to whether that's here at Michigan or somewhere else. And a big part of that is probably, Jim's decision. If Jim decides to go to the NFL, I have to think Ward Manuel is going to look internally, or at least consider internal options, and Sharon Moore would certainly be atop of the list. Jesse Minter, I mean, you kind of knew this was coming. His dad was a former college head coach. He cut his teeth at a lower level college programs. He worked for John Harbaugh in Baltimore. Kind of learning the defensive system and then bringing him here to Michigan. I have to think if Jim, does decide to go to the NFL, and again, that remains an if, Jesse, look to Jesse Minter to probably join him on staff. But if not, if Jim does decide to stay, Jesse Minter's name will probably continue to come up for head coaching jobs in college. And I got to think, defensive coordinator jobs in the NFL again, too.
I would be very surprised if if he's here next year, but that would be great. There's so much going on in the next 5 days that will change the direction of the program, but we'll see. Final question for now, Aaron, because there is still so much to talk about, and we can't get it all in. We'll have to save it for another show. But we have to celebrate this national championship and savor it. I mean, the last 3 years, really. And to that end, there's going to be a parade on Saturday. We're recording on Friday, so tomorrow, followed by a celebration at Chrysler. Even if the weather is dicey, no matter what, this should, and I'm sure will be, a day to remember. And even though you'll be working at that event, it should be quite the celebration, shouldn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, no doubt. I think that's probably the moment where all the memories and, the different, moments of the season kind of come into play for all of us, right? Asking players immediately after the game about the season and their favorite moment, it's always a tough deal because everything's clouded by, the moment at hand, winning the game. And I think that's a moment for everyone, an opportunity for everyone to reflect on the season that was, the successes Michigan had, all the great moments and even some of the negative stuff. It'll be a good time. I will say anyone listening who does plan on going, bundle up because it's supposed to be cold and snowy and everything else. But if you're able to go, it's one of those, especially if you're a diehard Michigan fan, that's going to be one of those moments that, you probably will never forget.
Oh, exactly. And hey, it's Michigan. Everyone's going to be bundled up and ready and there no matter what happens because we've all waited for this for so long. I mean, you can say this over and over, but you have to savor it and enjoy these moments because they don't come around all that often. And it might be a long time before we get to the top of the mountain again. So these are the days you want to store in your memory banks, aren't they?
Exactly. I mean, you just have to go back to like 2019 and 2020, right? Remember where Michigan was then as a program, struggling to get to the Big Ten mountaintop, maybe underachieving, you can make the case. And just 3 or 4 years later, they're at the pinnacle of college football. They're the kings of college football. They've dethroned, the SEC, Alabama's and Georgia's and everything else. And enjoy the moment because it may not last. That's what I always tell people.
No, absolutely. So it's been great talking about it with you, Aaron. I mean, we're going to be talking about this for a long time, but and you just cannot get it all in one show how much this has meant to everyone, the fans of every generation and the media that covers the team. It's been outstanding. So with us today has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. As always, Aaron, we appreciate you being so generous with your time, and we look forward to that next visit very soon.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, I'm getting the show up on Saturday afternoon just before the parade gets started, so I'll keep it short because I'm ready to watch this celebration too. You and I know the next few weeks will be filled with a lot of news. We've already had several players announced for the draft. We knew that would happen. There are still some big decisions to be made, and next week it could get crazy. Will Jim stay or head to the NFL? Will JJ be back? Will we get active in the portal? Will the NCAA turn up the heat? It will not be a dull winter in Ann Arbor, I can guarantee you that. But for now, let's just bask in the glory of everything Team 144 has accomplished. It was great fun, and as a program and a fan base, we deserve our moment in the sun. That does it for now. I'll be back next week, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls, at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!